Let's start in East Africa. Safaricom has been East Africa's most profitable firm for quite a while now, with a run of record-breaking profit numbers year after year. Now, just about 25.5 billion shillings, that's roughly 300 million US dollars. The pre-tax profits reported on Tuesday this week are relatively large, but they need some context to give you an idea of the scale involved within the context of East Africa. Now, there's several ways of putting these numbers into context. We're going to pick two, for example. At $300 million, Safcom's pre-tax profits for the 2012 fiscal year could cover about 10% of Rwanda's current budget for the 2012-2013 fiscal year, or 75% of its highly subscribed Eurobond. If it was a bank in Kenya, for example, it would make just one out of every 4 shillings made in pre-tax profits by the entire sector. Now, we're talking about 40 plus different bodies. Altogether, 1 out of every 4 shillings of the profits there would come from just one company. But of course, where does this cash come from? Well, let's look at the numbers in a little more depth here, shall we? Voice calls, as usual, are still Safaricom's bread and butter, just like many other telcos right around the world. Not many of them, however, have this here, M-Pesa. Comparing average revenues per user across these 4 revenue lines, data and M-Pesa, quite frankly, aren't badly off. SMS ARPU clearly indicate that the WhatsApp effect, that shift towards data-driven services, also hasn't kicked in here. Never mind the fact that Kenya has about 7 million plus discrete internet connections. Over 99% of those are mobile. However, over the long term, some more interesting trends do emerge. Non-voice revenues are becoming bigger and bigger players. It's moved up from making less than 2 out of every 10 shillings of revenue in the 2010 fiscal year to over 3 in 10 last year alone. M-Pesa, of course, out of all this, has doubled its share of revenues in that time frame. But whatever metric you look at it, Safaricom's numbers for the last fiscal year are absolutely amazing. So the question, of course, is what does the future hold for Safaricom? Let's ask its chief executive. Bob Collymore joins us now live in our studios here in Nairobi. Mr. Collymore, thank you very much for your time. Data, of course, is an enormous part of Safaricom's future plans. And in this particular fiscal year, average revenues per user in this segment dropped. What happened?
There's a simple explanation, actually. We dropped our price. So whilst we have grown the data users to just over 7 million, we dropped our out-of-bundle price by 50%. And that's why the ARPU has dropped. The other reason why ARPU would drop is as you introduce more people into the segment, you get lower and lower value users. And so in the same way as voice ARPU will drop the more people you bring into the market.
Indeed. So in effect, you're priming the pump. Let's talk about M-Pesa. You're undertaking an 18-month overhaul of the platform that M-Pesa runs on. What does this project involve and what effect will it have on your balance sheet once completed?
Well, the effect on the balance sheet is that we move from an OPEX-based model to a CAPEX-based model. At the moment, the platform is based in Germany and is managed by Vodafone, so we pay them a fee. We pay them a 10% fee to do that. The platform was never really designed to handle the volumes of traffic that we're currently handling. We've recently upgraded it to handle about 250 transactions per second, but you can imagine that rapidly that will go out of sync. So the new platform should be able to handle starting from 600 transactions per second and then scalable beyond that. The other thing it does, it gives us much more functionality, so it allows local developers and local businesses and indeed local banks to simply plug into the platform.
Indeed, so that should make it a lot easier to actually use. Let's talk about M-Pesa tariffs. So you raised those sometime earlier this year in response to financial transaction tax by government. What effect did that tax have on M-Pesa revenues?
Well, what we did is we passed most of the tax on to customers. So it was up to 10%. In some cases, we passed on 9% because we had to do some rounding down. But for lower value transactions, up to 100 shillings, we absorbed that. And the rough cost to us was about 400 million of revenue.
On Tuesday, you also warned against mobile telephony being regarded as a sort of general cash cow. We've got a budget coming up in 4 weeks' time. Lots of rumours flying around about potential tax hikes. Where do you draw the line? What are your options in case there's another tax hike in the future lumped on Safaricom?
Well, we would kind of like to draw the line behind us. There is a tendency in some markets, some emerging markets and African markets, to see mobile telephony as what you described as a cash cow. And the reason for that is because it's very easy to track how much people are spending because of some very efficient billing platforms. We think that this is still a very nascent market, particularly mobile phones, particularly mobile money. We're also concerned about imposition of VAT on handsets, because handsets actually is the big barrier to entry. People talk a lot about tariffs. Now in Kenya we have amongst the lowest tariffs. I think only Angola compares to us at about 4 US cents a minute. But that's not the barrier to entry. The barrier to entry is handsets, and so we are going to urge the government to look carefully at this and not to impose VAT on handsets.
Finally, Mr. Collymore, on Tuesday your share prices essentially hit a 4-year high. Dividends are going up 40%. Some fairly decent numbers here. What should we expect from Safaricom over the next 1 year?
Well, the next year we expect growth to be, in the high singles, low double digits. I think you need to look at the half year on half year, and that will give you an indication of how we see that growth continuing. And the reason why you need to look at the second half compared to the second half is because you're comparing relatively similar pricing. If you look at the whole year, it's distorted because half of the year we were charging a higher price.
Indeed. We'll have to leave it there for the time being. Thank you very much for your time. That's Bob Collymore, is the Chief Executive Officer of Safaricom here in Kenya. Some absolutely stunning numbers coming out of that company earlier this week.